Keep the faith. Be bold. You're working for a good cause.
Welcome in, everyone, to the Louisiana Now podcast. I am your host, Todd Rossnagel. It is great to have you along with us. In today's episode, we catch up with Rob Fairley, President and CEO of the United Methodist Foundation of Louisiana. Rob just recently announced his retirement from the foundation. It marks the end of a distinguished career. Rob began his employment at the foundation in 1998. First as a development officer and then moved to executive vice president in 2005 and has served as president and CEO since 2006. Under Rob's leadership, the foundation has grown to become one of the largest foundations in all of Methodism and a fantastic partner in ministry for the Louisiana Conference. As Bishop Harvey recently said of Rob, he leaves a great legacy of servant leadership and love for the church. His impact across the conference will be felt for years to come. We caught up with Rob and began our conversation with reflection on how the announcement to retire has been received.
Todd, it's really been gratifying. It's nice to hear from people. And when this announcement was first made, I heard from, more people than you normally do in a short period of time. And they were praising the work of the foundation. So it was a lot of fun talking to a lot of people and catching up with them.
I know when I first heard that Rob Fairley is going to be retired, I can't see the word retired next to your name. What do you think that's going to look like for you?
Interestingly, this virus has given me a little glimpse of it. So like many other people, I started working remotely from my home. So right now I'm upstairs in my little home office. And I found that I'd go through my normal routine and then come upstairs with a cup of coffee. And about lunchtime, I'd go downstairs and eat lunch with my wife and then come back up here. What that did is I was at home. That wasn't a bad thing. I got to eat lunch with my wife every day. And, we like each other. We laugh a lot. She's a great cook. And it dawned on me to say, this could be a pretty good long-term full-time gig. So that's how I probably began to think this way. My wife has enjoyed volunteering since she retired some 15 or 20 years ago. So I anticipate I'll be able to do a lot more of that. A couple boards have contacted me that I might join. And of course, like all retired couples, we anticipate doing some more travel.
Rob, you have done so much for the foundation over the years. What are you most proud of?
Todd, I'm really proud of the foundation. The Book of Discipline only really points us toward development of long-term endowment style funds. And I'm real proud of the fact that we now manage about $200 million in assets, and $50 million of that is in the form of permanent funds, which is a great development. Most churches probably think of us in terms of money management.
Right.
And last year, churches that had money in our balance fund earned over 13%, and our impact fund over 20%. So those are good things. But probably the most exciting part is what we've been able to do with grants.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I think I shared with you in an earlier time a story of kind of how it dawned on me one day coming home from preaching a sermon that I was telling people we needed to be generous in a first fruits fashion. And as I was thinking of the budget of the foundation, we were operating on the, if we have any money left over at the end of the year, give it away approach. And that inspired us to change that. We made it the first line item in our budget under expenses. We first thought about tithing. That's pretty biblical, 10% of our gross revenue. But it's the biblical minimum. They're tithes and offerings. And we thought to be leading in this field, we ought to do more. So we started double tithing. So we take 20% of our anticipated revenues for the incoming year, and we set that aside for our grants program. And it has really been a wonderful experience. people will be familiar with our seminary service loan programs. We took a big interest in leadership development. Leadership is so important in all facets of life, from family to business, but certainly in our churches. We developed our own leadership development program. We called it LEAP and had a number of people who are currently leaders in the conference now go through that. We participated in a couple others. Apple, most recently, Dakota Wesleyan University has had a program for that. Which can lead to even an MBA for those who wish to pursue it. So the grants program enabled us to do those types of things. Of course, we've given trucks to disaster relief and done a variety of things. Relationships are very important to us, well, to everybody. And so our continued effort to maintain and develop new relationships, reaching out to churches even during the pandemic, that's our reconnaissance, so to speak. That's where we gather some information, discern needs and opportunities. And then we have a committee made up of board members of the foundation, laity, clergy, business owners, educators, and that group of people, those people come together and bring back all their varied backgrounds and can look at these various needs we've uncovered and really enhance a response so we can react directly and quickly to needs of the church, which help them continue their mission. So that's a pretty long answer to what you asked me, but that's probably the most fun part of what we do.
Absolutely. From LEAP to the seminary service loan grants and your most recent efforts to equip churches with technology. And I wanted to kind of ask you a little bit more about that, Rob, because I think it really highlights the ability for the foundation to pivot and move quickly. You saw a need where churches had a strong desire to increase giving through texting. You were able to help them. You were able to help some churches who perhaps didn't have the technology needed at such a time as this. I think that's one of the most valuable assets to the foundation, is the ability to quickly move when there's a need.
I agree absolutely. The conference structure has so much to keep up with and so many concerns. And I don't see how they do all that they do. And we're out here, obviously we exist only because the church exists, and our purpose is to support ministries out there, but we're not encumbered by some of the things that the annual conference is. So just automatically we're able to discern things. In the case of the equipment you're referring to, I had a conversation with a pastor in Monroe, and they were telling me of their challenges and trying to reach out with this virus thing and uh, the needs that they had. And that opened the door, the idea for us to go back to our committee and discuss this. I think we offered this, I believe we called it an innovative ministry grant. It was not strictly for the equipment that would enhance or enable for some, just from the very beginning, to worship virtually with their people. And of course, I'm most grateful for, helped us, because I certainly didn't know one camera from another. But we responded to, I don't even remember the number, 30 churches or whatever it was, to help them with their equipment. But we also heard other ideas like drive-in churches and mail out Sunday school lessons, just a variety of things. So from need that we heard from these conversations, these continuation of relationships, this structure allowed us to pivot, as you say, and address those needs. And making this intentional decision years earlier to dedicate a pretty significant part of our income stream to this effort to grants, it all came together, and it's been a lot of fun, and I think has made a great impact.
It has. And you have also pivoted to produce webinars in this digital age. We have highlighted some of those webinars here on the Louisiana Now podcast. And of course, you can find archives of those webinars on the United Methodist Foundation of Louisiana's website. We will, of course, leave a link to the foundation's website in the show notes of this episode. And I say it will continue, Rob. Chris Spencer has been named as your the next Rob Fairley, I guess. Tell the folks at home a little bit about Chris Spencer, how excited you are for him and what he may bring to the foundation.
Well, I'm very excited. I've used this phraseology recently in talking about Chris, and he laughs at me, but I call him an answer to prayer. I believe that one of the greatest responsibilities any CEO has is to help plan for the future of the organization that they lead and help in such transition. So, some years, 5 years ago or so, I was thinking forward and thought it would be great if we had an internal candidate. The board makes the decision, Rob Fairley doesn't. But if we had somebody who had been around long enough to absorb the culture and learn some of the nuances, it would certainly be a benefit to the foundation. So I tried and looked and interviewed and shared with my wife how frustrated it was making me because nobody seemed to be the right fit. And she agreed to help pray with me. So we started praying for the right person. And lo and behold, there's this guy that I'd been going to church with for years. We'd served on some committees together for years, and it was Chris Spencer. And so he had the background, he's a lifelong Methodist. He spent over 20 years with a major financial institution, had the financial understanding and background, is about as good a people person as you will ever meet in your entire life.
Absolutely.
And he was right there in front of me. And so we had a meeting, and I think he anticipated where we were going in the conversation before I really even started. And he immediately deflected it, went on to talk about how happy he was in his job and so forth. So I accepted that and went on. And sometime later, he reached back out to me and said, let's have lunch again. Let's talk again about that. And we were able to explore it. And he told me later that it had registered in his mind and it kind of started eating on him. And so to me, that's providential. That's a God thing. So him coming to us, I think he has all the gifts and graces to do a great job.
I'm just curious how all of the Duke grads in Louisiana are going to put up with a North Carolina Tar Heel.
Well, that's a problem for him. That's just not my problem.
Absolutely. Well, Rob, as you stare at retirement, many are staring at an uncertain future with the church, with the larger denomination, and even inside the Louisiana Conference. But I know you, and I know that you are confident in the church going forward and persevering through what could be a perhaps troublesome future or rocky future, if you will. I know Rob Fairley, and I know you are confident.
Absolutely. Several years ago, I was sitting in a pew with my family. This was before my mother died and when my children were all still young and single. And we were sitting in a pew at First Methodist Church. And I was just thinking back about how my children represented the fourth generation of our family to worship God at First Methodist Church. And the point of my telling you that is, I don't know what it looked like when my grandparents worshiped there in 1920 or 1918 or whatever the year might have been. Here we are 100 years later, and I know what it looks like now. I have no idea what it's going to look like in 2120, but one thing I'm certain of, the church was here before I came, survived my being here, and will be here in the future. So I have faith that God has always been with us, has worked through his church, and will continue to do so in the future.
Rob, if you could give some advice to the local church, perhaps to a pastor that is listening to this episode today, she or he has been through a lot over the last year. If they were sitting across from you at a famous Rob Fairley lunch or Rob Fairley coffee, which I'm sure you're going to have more of in your retirement, what would you say to them?
Keep the faith. Be bold. You're working for a good cause. I'm a lay person, so I've been going to church most every Sunday of my life. When I come and sit in that pew and look up at that pulpit at you, Pastor, that's a pretty high level of respect I am giving you. And so lead me. Don't be a manager, be a leader. Be excited. Encourage me. Forgive the things that need to be forgiven, but be Christ's representative here on earth for me. Help me to move forward in my life and know the right way to live. It's a unique opportunity, but I think we have people that can do it well. So I would say keep the faith, be bold, and lead.
Rob Fairley with the United Methodist Foundation, a friend, a tremendous resource here in the Louisiana Conference, a friend of the podcast, as you've supported this podcast since the day we launched. I would say I'm going to miss you, but I know that you are right up the road for a cup of coffee or lunch whenever I need it. But most of all, Rob, thank you for your time, and thank you for your commitment to Louisiana and the United Methodist Church.
Todd, you're most welcome, and I've said this before, but let me give you a little plug right here. I am so glad that CBS, NBC, ABC, Fox don't listen to you very closely, because your talent is so terrific. I'm afraid they'd steal you away. So thank you all that you give to this church as well.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that compliment. Go forth and continue to make the kingdom a beautiful thing.
Thanks.
As we mentioned, the United Methodist Foundation of Louisiana Executive Committee has named Chris Spencer President and CEO of the organization. It's effective July 1. We will catch up with Spencer soon here on the Louisiana Now podcast and can't wait to visit with him. Thank you so much for joining us, and we do want to say thank you to the Foundation because, as you know, they have supported the Louisiana Now podcast since we began. For our producer, Mary Burley, I'm your host, Todd Rossnagel. Thanks again for listening.